Hi, in this series of videos, I'll be solving the free response questions from the 2023 AP Stats exam. Check the description section for the links to all the separate questions. Once I'm done uploading all 6 individual questions, I'll post a combined video of all of them. This one is on question 2. A developer wants to know whether adding fibers to concrete used in paving driveways will reduce the severity of cracking because any driveway with severe cracks will have to be repaired by the developer. The developer conducts a completely randomized experiment with 60 new homes that need driveways. 30 of the driveways will be randomly assigned to receive concrete that contains fibers, and the other 30 driveways will receive concrete that does not contain fibers. After 1 year, the developer will record the severity of cracks in each driveway on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 representing not cracked at all and 10 representing severely cracked. Okay, so a score, a numerical score, a quantitative variable. Part A, based on the information provided about the developer's experiment, identify each of the following. Experimental units. There are 60 units and each is receiving something, each is receiving concrete. So those are the experiment units or the 60 driveways. This is very similar to question 2 last year, 2022, and all they really needed was the experimental units down to the single unit. So you don't need to say more. If you want to say more, you can say things like that received the concrete, but I don't think it's that necessary. The treatments, and don't forget that the placebo always counts as a treatment. In this case, it's kind of easy to see that, once you identify the driveways as the 60 driveways, then whatever they are getting is a treatment. So the treatments are the concrete with fibers, and the concrete without fibers. And the response variable is the output from the experiment, and the output is that they record the severity of cracks, the score from 0 to 10 of severity of cracks. Part B, describe an appropriate method the developer could use to randomly assign concrete that contains fibers and concrete that does not contain fibers to the 60 driveways. For a random assignment question like this, you want to make sure of 2 things. One is the probability. It should be even. In this case, there are 2 choices, either with fiber or without fiber. Then each choice should have a 50-50 chance. And the second thing you need to worry about or ensure is the numerical number of each outcome. Since we have 60 driveways divided into 2, it's got to be 30-30 and not something like 31-29. Here's an answer that would be wrong. You flip a coin. Great. So that's 50-50. Heads with fiber, tails without fiber, 50-50, but it may not guarantee 30 each, because there is an extremely high likelihood that if you flip a coin 60 times, then there will be more of one than the other, either more heads than tails or more tails than heads. So that would be a wrong answer. I'm going to show 2 possible right answers. One is like flip a coin, where the randomization is done on each individual. And the second approach, which is my personal preference, but probably I'm in the minority, is to randomize the whole list and then just chop it in half. Flip a coin. repeat, but instead of just repeat all the way, you repeat until there's 30 of something. Then the rest get the other. You may feel kind of uneasy about this because it feels like you're flipping a coin, you get either fiber or no fiber. And then once you get 30 of something, then the rest of them, they all get the same thing. It feels wrong, but it turns out that it's perfectly fine. It feels wrong because you have a string of people at the end that all get the same treatment. They all get either all fiber or they all get either all no fiber. But it turns out to be perfectly fine. Nonetheless, because it feels kind of weird to me, it's not my first preference. You could have a whole bunch of fibers at the end, but you could also have a whole bunch of not fibers at the end. So at the end, each of position is still 50-50. So that's one way of doing it, where you do it randomly on each person at a time. Another way of doing it is to randomize the entire list. For example, by putting them in a hat, shake well, and blindly pull them out in order. Then what you have is a big list that's already all random. Then you might as well just do 30-30 like this. Or if you want it to feel more random, you can alternate them. Whatever, it really doesn't matter. The whole list is already in random order. So those are two possible answers to part B. Part C. Suppose the developer finds that there is a statistically significant reduction in the mean severity of cracks in driveways using the concrete that contains fibers compared to the driveways using concrete that does not contain fibers. In terms of the developer's conclusion, what is the benefit of randomly assigning the driveways to either the concrete that contains fibers or the concrete that does not contain fibers? This is very similar to question 2B in 2022. That question is a little bit ambiguous. So the wording here makes it clearer. They want you to identify a benefit of something, and they want to specifically want you to do it in terms of the developer's conclusion. Why do we randomly assign things? The general idea usually is so that if there's some sort of external factor, like a confounding factor or the lurking variable, then it sort of evens out when you randomly assign things. For example, you may think that what kind of vehicle the homeowner is using may affect the driveway, right? If you have a huge big car that sits on the driveway a lot, then that's one thing. Whereas if you have a small car and it only drives across the driveway into the garage, then that's a different thing. Or if you randomly assign them into two groups, then you're kind of hoping that if there's a house with big cars that sit on the driveway in the fiber group, but because you were doing things randomly, then there's a chance there will be another one in the non-fiber group. Basically, you want to even things out by randomly assigning things. And how does that affect the final conclusion? This is a hypothesis testing answer that there is a statistically significant difference. You can think of it like it's a two independent mean t-test. So how does the fact that you can even out the effects of the vehicles affect the final answer? Well, it makes the final answer more correct. when you're saying that it really is the difference between the concrete, then you are able to ignore or overcome the effects of the other variables. So let's write it like that. Is to distinguish between the effect of fiber. By the way, when you write these things, be careful of words implying. You know what? I want a comparison word, so I say to better distinguish between the effect of fiber versus the confounding effect of other factors such as vehicle type. Now, what we have here is a controlled experiment, and controlled experiments are supposed to allow us to prove causation. So we might as well say something more about causation, just in case. I'm going to say it reduces the risk of a wrong conclusion on what led to the reduction in severity of cracks. Right, putting the word fiber, putting the word vehicle type and cracks gets me context. Right? Also, context is always an important thing to put in an AP Stats answer. That's my answer to question 2. Check the description section for my answers to the other questions. If you think I'm wrong something or unclear about something, please write in the comments. I especially appreciate feedback like that. Subscribe for more contents. Check out my statistics playlist for more videos. And thanks for watching. Bye.